Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, as happy as can be to be here with you on a Friday and here with Jimmy Akin for both hours for Ask Me Anything, and already every single line is full. I don't know if that's a record, but that was pretty quick. 888-318-7884 is the number. If you've got a question about anything, you're welcome to call and talk with Jimmy. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Been doing this for well over 3 decades, and happy to talk with you with about whatever question you've got. Jimmy, also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the new Jimmy Akin podcasts, and he's like regularly on like 6 podcasts. Basically, there is no podcasting without Jimmy Akin, or there's very little podcasting without Jimmy. Welcome, Jimmy.
Howdy, how's it going, Cy?
Really good, really good. I'm finally starting my Christmas shopping, so I feel really good about myself getting going early.
I don't have mine done yet, but I had mine started a while back. In fact, I ordered a present for someone from England this year, and I ordered it in time that I already got it.
Oh, very nice. Very good. I'm not going to be able to use the delivery services, I don't think, unless I do maybe my gifts from DoorDash. But I have to go shopping this weekend. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Do you have a nice Christmassy, crisp weather there in Arkansas yet, or no?
Oh yeah, it is. It hadn't snowed yet, but it's quite chilly, and so it's Christmassy in that respect. It's certainly cold enough to snow. It's just we don't have the moisture at the moment, but I'm sure that'll come.
All right, and you'll have, you're faithful with the episodes, so you will have through the Christmas and the New Year rush and all that, you'll have regular weekly episodes for both Jimmy Akin's podcast and the Mysterious World podcast.
Well, for Mysterious World, we have something coming every Friday, and this Friday it is on The Man from Taured, which is a story that has been circulating on the internet for a while that claims that back in the 1950s in Japan, there was a man who showed up at customs who was from an unknown country called Taured, and when they asked him to point to it on a map, he pointed to what in our world is known as Andorra. And then they took him into custody because they couldn't just release him. They didn't know what country he was from. And then he vanished from his hotel room. And the claim is that he was a visitor from another dimension where Andorra is known as Taured. And it turns out there is a real life basis to this story. And I go into what the real life basis is. So that's Mysterious World. Then for the weeks following the Fridays following Christmas and Thanksgiving, we're going to have Thanksgiving and Christmas weird questions. And then on the Jimmy Akin podcast coming up this Monday, we have our Christmas episode. It's on what does it mean in Luke when he says there was no room at the inn.
Very good.
Very, very likely does not mean what people think it means, which is like Tom Bodett turned off the light at Motel 6. It very likely does not mean that. It means something else. And so I talk about that for our Christmas episode. Then we're going to take a week off on that, but we'll be back in January and be looking at some couple of episodes on the prayers of angels on behalf of human beings, because there is a robust belief in Jewish and Christian circles from before the time of Christ and then during the time of Christ of that the angels in heaven intercede for us. That's something a lot of people aren't aware of. And then we're going to look at how that changed when human beings started going to heaven and their prayers as well. So got a lot of good stuff coming up.
Very good. Very good. I mean, if you get a Tom Bodett reference in the first 4 minutes of the show, you know it's going to be a good show. So 888-318-7884 is the number. We'll leave the light on for you. Let's start with Colin in Newfoundland, Canada, listening on Catholic.com. Colin, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. Jimmy, I've heard you before say that you don't think computers will ever be alive or conscious because computers don't have any characteristics we associate with life, like biology, DNA, etc. But I have also talked to atheists who use similar lines of argumentation to say God or angels couldn't be alive or conscious since they are also not biological. Now, I could say that life and consciousness aren't constrained to biology, but then that would seem to leave open a possibility for some constructed non-biological system, perhaps like a computer, having the properties of life or consciousness. So how would you clarify those categories?
Well, so I think that we have to, in approaching this question, I would say that the way I approach it is to take a cautious approach that begins by looking at what I'm confident of. And what I'm confident of is that humans have consciousness. I'm also confident that animals have consciousness because they display it. Even though Rene Descartes thought that dogs are basically robots that have no consciousness and just are behaved to program certain ways, I don't see it that way. The evidence seems to me that animals do have consciousness, and dogs very much act like they have feelings, and they have love for people. They get hungry. They have all kinds of behaviors that, even though they can't talk, they just seem to display consciousness. And there are other animals that can talk to a limited degree, like gray parrots, and they seem to display consciousness as well. So I would say that we've got good evidence for animals and plants, and animals and humans to have consciousness. We don't have that, though, for machines. And like if you have an added machine, it may be able to, perform certain operations, but if you then interpret the result of those operations, it can be interpreted as having meaning. But that's the same as an abacus. An abacus, when you're sliding beads around on it, the abacus really doesn't understand what's going on. You're using those beads as symbols of meaning. Like 2 beads here stands for 2 apples or whatever it may be. And then if I slide another 2 beads over to them, then I've got 4 apples. But the meaning is in my consciousness. The abacus does not have its own consciousness. And similarly, an added machine is just a fancy abacus, and computers are just fancy adding machines. And so I don't see any evidence for machines having consciousness. They get better at replicating something that is interpreted by humans in terms of consciousness, but it appears to me that, unlike animals, with machines, it's just an illusion. And so I would say, at least based on the evidence we have, that it looks like there is a fundamental divide between biology, which is capable of supporting consciousness, and machines, which may be able to manipulate information but don't appear to understand that information, or have any awareness of what the information means. They just manipulate the data according to a certain set of rules. When it comes to God and angels, though, I've made a positive statement that biology does appear to support consciousness, and I've made a positive statement that machines don't appear to support consciousness. But God and angels are 2 new categories. God is his own category by himself. Angels are their own category by themselves. And so we have to look at, well, what evidence do we have? Does God appear to be conscious? Yes. Do angels appear to be conscious? Yes. But they're non-biological. So I would say that although biology is associated with consciousness, it is not a requirement for consciousness. And we have to look at the different categories we have and say, do we see good evidence for consciousness here? In the case of God, angels, and humans and other biological creatures like animals, I would say yes. But in the case of, I'm not even sure about all biological creatures, but in the case of higher animals, yes. But then in the case of machines, I just don't see any evidence of consciousness or awareness on their part.
Colin?
Yeah, that all makes sense to me, though I could imagine the comeback from an atheist of something like how would you distinguish between the consciousness that you observe in God and the false illusion of consciousness that you observe in something like an AI?
Well, I mean, that's something that I could probably write a philosophical paper about. I don't know that I can give you a short answer in a radio call-in, for something like that. But I would tend to turn to the arguments for the existence of God that support the idea of God as an infinite mind. And an infinite mind is definitely going to be a more plausible candidate for consciousness than something that's basically a glorified abacus. I can be more confident of God having consciousness than I can have a real consciousness, as opposed to the illusion of consciousness, if you understand what God is, as opposed to understanding what a computer is.
Colin, I'm going to say thanks and take the first break. Appreciate the call. It's always nice to talk with you. Lots more calls coming up for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Another great podcast on EWTN Podcast Central is Two Become Family. Renzo and Monica know marriage isn't easy. They try to bring the wisdom of Catholicism into everyday situations and conversations about marriage and family life. You can hear this and other faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates around the world at EWTN Podcast Central. Visit EWTN.com/radio and click on Podcast Central today.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Right now, our most popular promotion of this whole year, 2024, was the Crazy Good sale highlighting our School of Apologetics courses. We were offering full courses earlier in the year for $25 and mini courses for just $10, and people went crazy taking them, and they're really good courses. So here, as we approach the end of the year, we've resurrected those prices all weekend long. Check it out at shop.catholic.com or schoolofapologetics.com. You can go either to shop.catholic.com or schoolofapologetics.com and check it out. All the courses on sale. Long ones, $25. The mini courses, just $10. Jimmy Akin's our guest this hour. It's Ask Me Anything. All lines full at the moment. It's Saturday morning, about breakfast time in Seoul, South Korea, and that means our good friend Luke in Seoul. Luke, welcome. You got a question for Jimmy? I can't hear
Jimmy,
Luke.
good morning. I have a question for Jimmy.
Oh, you do? Good morning, Luke. Thank you. I can hear you fine now. I apologize for that. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right, Jimmy. My question is this. When Angel Gabriel approached Mary and Zachariah for the births of Jesus and John the Baptist respectively, they gave similar responses out of curiosity. But then Zachariah was punished by God and not Mary. So why was that?
Well, the answer is found if you read the text more carefully, because the answer is right there in the text. Gabriel, when he appeared to Zechariah, got a response that was challenging. The Zechariah said, in essence, by what sign am I going to know that this is going to happen? So he didn't believe what the angel told him. He wanted some kind of proof over and above what the angel told him. Whereas Mary didn't do that. She didn't ask, well, what are you going to show me to prove this to me? Instead, she asked a clarifying question, how is this going to be? And so she believed what the angel said, and that's confirmed for us later on in the text, where Elizabeth says, of Mary, blessed is she who believed what the Lord had said to her. And so Luke goes out of his way to make sure that we understand the difference between Zechariah's reaction and Elizabeth's reaction is that Zechariah did not just believe what Gabriel reported. He wanted further proof, whereas Mary did believe and just wanted it clarified how it was going to happen.
Luke, I tell you what, all the lines are full, so I'm going to leave it there, but say thank you very much for the call. And it's always nice to hear from you on a Saturday morning where you are, on a Friday afternoon where we are. The number here is 888-318-7884. Manny's in our time zone up there in Sacramento, California, watching on YouTube. Manny, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. My question is regarding Genesis 25:23, where God speaks to Rebekah. Why didn't she give that revelation to Isaac so that he could just bless Jacob to begin with instead of trying to bless Esau? I suppose I'm assuming. Yeah.
Well, we don't know that she didn't. It doesn't say. So for people who may not be familiar, the two twins struggle in her womb, and she inquires of the Lord to find out what does this mean. And she's told that there are two nations in her womb that will struggle, but the younger will serve the older. And so that's something that Genesis records happening, but it doesn't say, and she kept this to herself. She may well have told Isaac about it, and he just didn't remember, or he interpreted it a different way, or he didn't believe, because as we just saw in the Zechariah example, you don't automatically believe everything that you've been told. And so there are any number of reasons why he may not have acted on it. One reason is she didn't tell him, but another would be that she did tell him, and he decided he was going to bless Esau for some other reason. So that's that's something that we have to kind of leave in God's hands, because the text doesn't tell us. Also, the blessing is not the only thing that's relevant here. He also has a birthright, which he sells to Jacob, and the birthright is actually the more legal thing in terms of who has what rights under their kind of culture. The firstborn child inherited twice what any other sons did. So he got a double portion as his birthright, and he sold his birthright. So that's another factor here that has nothing to do with the blessing. So Jacob may not have seen his blessing as, representing a conflict with the revelation that was given. Also, not everything hinges on this one generation. Even if it's true that long term the people of the younger son are going to rule compared to the people of the older son, that doesn't tell you about the fates of those two individual sons necessarily. There are other possible ways of looking at this, because and then there's the fact that all of this is written at a significantly later distance, and so it's hard to tell exactly what was in the minds of the people at the time, and we just have to be content with a certain amount of ambiguity here.
And I will leave it there, and I hope that cleared it up enough for you, Manny. Thanks very, very much. There's a popular blog, Cultivating Catholic, Samantha. She goes by Sam, mother, and I'm told now of 8 kids. And it's now an Instagram and YouTube channel, Cultivating Catholic. And Sam has agreed to be a brand ambassador for us here at Catholic Answers. And I know people here are very excited about that association. Very popular, I think like more than 60,000 followers over there. And Sam asked us if we would ask you, Jimmy, a question on air for use at Cultivating Catholic. And here's the question. Why did Jesus need to be baptized? Wasn't he sinless?
Well, he was, and that's alluded to it at various points in the New Testament. It's even alluded to in the accounts of the baptism that we have, where in one of the Gospels, when Jesus approaches John for baptism, John says, hey, you ought to be baptized in me. And Jesus says, don't worry about it. let us do this to fulfill all righteousness. So that tells us a basic reason, which is this is somehow going to fulfill all righteousness. So what does that mean? Well, there have been proposals that have been made down through history about exactly in what way Jesus's baptism fulfills righteousness. One proposal is that Jesus sets a pattern for us to follow. If even he went to be baptized, then how much more do we need to? In which case, he's setting an example for us, and that's how his act fulfills righteousness. It's also been understood as an identification with us. He's identifying with us by his baptism, and that's part of him becoming our Savior. And it's been understood as, well, this inaugurates his ministry. And you find combinations of those explanations in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you look in paragraph 536 of the Catechism, it says, the baptism of Jesus is on his part the acceptance and inauguration of his mission as God's suffering servant. So that's one of the things it does. It says he allows himself to be numbered among sinners. He is already the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, meaning at his baptism. Already he is anticipating the baptism of his bloody death, so it foreshadows his death. Already he is coming to fulfill all righteousness. That is, he is submitting himself entirely to his Father's will. Out of love, he consents to this baptism of death for the remission of our sins. The Father's voice responds to the Son's acceptance, proclaiming his entire delight in the Son. The Spirit, whom Jesus possesses in fullness from his conception, comes to rest on him. Jesus will be the source of the Spirit for all mankind. At his baptism, the heavens were opened, the heavens that Adam's sin had closed, and the waters were sanctified by the descent of Jesus and the Spirit, a prelude to the new creation. So all of these are things that are going on in baptism. And one that the Catechism doesn't clearly mention here, but that is mentioned in John's Gospel, is that as a result of the baptism, the Holy Spirit visibly descended on Jesus, and that was a sign to John that he was the one that John had been waiting for, because John said he didn't initially know who it was going to be, but God had told him, the one whom you see the Spirit descend upon, he's the chosen one. And it was at his baptism that event happened. So it's a complex of several different reasons.
Sam, thanks very much for the question and for the association. Check out Cultivating Catholics at YouTube, or check out the blog. Lots of great and very approachable, accessible material there to help people understand the Catholic faith. I got time to go to a phone call. Noah's in Texas listening on the Catholic Answers app. Noah, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Very well.
Great. So I was talking with a Protestant that I go to school with, and we were talking about worship. And we both believed that worship needed a sacrifice to be worship. And so, of course, we have the Eucharist. But then they said that Protestants believe like laying down what they have, so like what their sins, like laying down their lives for God, is a sacrifice that fulfills worship. So how could I comprehend that? How could I go against that? And what does the Catholic Church teach on that?
Well, I would say that that when Protestants make sacrifices for God, like of their time, talent, treasure, that kind of thing, well, they are making sacrifices, and that's a form of worship. That doesn't make it the same worship as the Mass. Unfortunately, they don't have the Mass because they rejected a sacramental priesthood, and so they don't have ministers who are able to confect the Eucharist, but they are able to make other sacrifices, what St. Paul refers to in Romans as spiritual sacrifices, but that's not the same as the Eucharistic sacrifice, which Jesus intended to be part of Christian liturgical worship. So they do have valid forms of worship in the forms of sacrifice, but they don't have the fullness of what Christ wanted for his church, unfortunately.
Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you very much, Noah. You know what, Noah? I haven't given out any books today, and something in me says you would enjoy Jimmy's book, The Drama of Salvation. I don't know what it is. I just got the Drama of Salvation feel. So I'd love to send it to you. If you will hang on the line, we will send you a copy right there in Texas. Let's go to Michael in Illinois watching on YouTube. Michael, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Michael, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
just
I'm
in
my
general,
office.
Mike, hang, that's okay. Just a second, Michael. We'll need to carry this on the other side of the break in all likelihood. But just for you and every other listener, if you call in, you don't need to ask if we can hear you. If we can't hear you, we'll let you know. But it kind of makes for bad radio if every person who calls says, "Can you hear me?" as the first thing. So it's an understandable thing that listeners sometimes do, but it's really not necessary, and we'll let you know. Having said that, what's your question?
So I'm a youth minister, and this is actually my student's question. She really likes you.
Oh, cool.
It's a time travel prayer question. So
Oh,
her
wait, you got to
question
time
is-
travel now. Can you time travel for
Yeah.
about 90 seconds while we take a quick break?
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't manage that clock very well, but sometimes I do that, Michael. Just hang on. We will be right back. More Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. The lines are busy, so I know there's lots more questions to come. Hang on. We'll get to them right after this. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun. And that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth today at 4 p.m. Eastern
on the next Beacon of Truth. We're starting our celebration for Christmas as we also look at Soulful Psalm 48.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Michael's on the line. I made Michael wait. He's got a time travel question from one of his students. He teaches, I believe he said, religious education. And so we'll go right back to Michael. Did I get that right, Michael? You said you teach religious education?
Yeah, I do youth ministry in the confirmation program.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let's send you a book then before you go. But go ahead with your time travel question for Jimmy.
So the question is, can a prayer be applied kind of retroactively? So if she were to pray a rosary in the morning and then she found out that her friend's grandmother died that night, could she apply the rosary that she prayed in the morning to the thing that her friend had asked, told her that her grandmother died?
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the question. By the way, you said she's a fan of mine, so please say howdy to her for me. Can you repeat the scenario again just to make sure that I have it down?
Sure. So if she said a rosary in the morning and then she finds out, her friend tells her that her grandmother passed that evening, can she offer the rosary she's already set up for that intention?
Okay. I would say yes, as long as she hasn't excluded that possibility by a positive act of will. So if you're someone who intends to say a rosary for certain intentions only, and you exclude other intentions by a positive act of will, it's like this is for intentions A, B, and C, but not anything else, well, then you can't retroactively add to it. But if you say your prayers with open intentions, like for whatever the needs are, and or more generally, you just don't exclude adding a future intention to it, then retroactively, once you learn about that need, you can include it retroactively in the intentions for that rosary. It may or may not be the same as offering a brand new rosary just for that intention, but unless you've positively said, my prayers are only for those intentions that I consciously think of at the time or have consciously thought of up to that time, then there's no reason in principle why it can't be included retroactively.
Awesome.
So I would say it's about intention.
I'll tell you what, I bet you're going to get millions more questions in your time teaching the young ones. So how about a daily defense, 365 days plus one to becoming a better apologist? Lots and lots of answers to lots and lots of questions in there. I think it'll be a helpful resource for you. Thank you, Michael. Let's go to our good friend Emma in Hayden, Idaho, listening on the app. Welcome, Emma. You got a question for Jimmy?
I do. I was on a site that was offering pray-along rosaries, and there was one that said 15 minutes, and it was literally like this, Jimmy. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. That just sounded so disrespectful to me. Is that valid?
Well, it's not invalid in the sense that prayers don't really come in valid or invalid categories. But I would say that and people are different on this, so I try to be understanding of different perspectives. One perspective says that your prayer will have additional value if you're being sincere about it, which means actually attending to the words that you're saying and meaning them. Other people would say, well, even the intention to say the prayer is sufficient. And so even if you don't attend to every word that you're saying, which is very easy to have happen as, the human mind wanders when we're saying something, that's sufficient. And I would say there's value in both of those perspectives. I wouldn't say either one of them is right to the exclusion of the other. So I would say it's good to have and kind of minimally sufficient to have the intention to say a prayer, whether you think about every word of it or not. But then I would also say that there is added value to say in the prayer in a way that is at a human speed where you can actually think about what you're saying. So I would say I think there's truth in both perspectives. I would say it's not like God's not going to hear you if you didn't pay attention to every single word. But on the other hand, if you're saying a prayer in a way that does allow you to think about the words that you're saying, then you're able to do more than just have the intention of saying those words. You're able to meditate on them as well, and there's added value in that.
Emma, it's always nice to hear from you. It is a busy Friday, so I'm going to keep going. Thanks for calling very much, Emma. I'm going to go to Florida now, where Alicia is watching on YouTube. Alicia, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy. I had a question for you. About 9 years ago, I was working at a Baptist Bible youth camp, And one morning before the camper showed up, I was woken up a few minutes before my alarm clock from the bunk bed I was in being shaken. When I looked over, I saw what appeared to be a shadow person. It was shadowy and kind of clear looking, but I saw it directly shaking my bed, and then it zipped away from my bed and then paused and then zipped down the aisle toward the window into the light. And I've never been able to really talk to anybody about it to get their opinion on what it may have been.
Okay. So this happened in a hypnopompic state, meaning that you were waking up from sleep, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when this happened, did you experience do you recall having any difficulty moving? Like, was your body sluggish? Did you feel paralyzed or anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay. The reason I asked that latter question is there is a phenomenon that's purely natural known as sleep paralysis, in which the module in our brain that keeps us from acting out our dreams and thus paralyzes us while we're asleep so we don't injure ourselves or others, fails to switch off when consciousness returns. And people who have sleep paralysis will lay there in a semi-conscious state, and their subconscious often tries to interpret the paralysis in terms of something is going wrong here. And they often feel like they're being attacked, and that there's some evil agency that is causing them to be paralyzed. Some people will experience that as a witch is paralyzing them. That was a common one in the past. Others will say, "Oh, it was aliens that were paralyzing me." Other people, I've had it. Not often, but I've had it a few times, and I interpreted it as some kind of situation where there are like government military agents coming down my hallway or something. And so sleep paralysis is a real thing, and because of the dreamlike content that can occur when one is still only partially awake, I wanted to ask about the paralysis issue to see if that might have played a factor here, but you said no. And in that case, it could be something else. There are reports of shadow people that are astonishingly common. And ironically, they didn't really come to prominence until the 1990s. But as soon as they started to be discussed, all kinds of people started coming out of the woodwork saying, yeah, I've had that. And shadow people reports are actually quite common. And there are a variety of possible explanations for them, really more than I can go into in a brief radio answer. But I've got a resource I can recommend to you. In episode 221 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, I devoted the whole episode to shadow people and what's reported about them and what the possible explanations are. And so all you got to do to find that is go to mysterious.fm, like FM radio, mysterious.fm/221 for episode 221. So mysterious.fm/221, or just Google Jimmy Akin Shadow People.
I hope you find that helpful. Thank you very much, Alicia. A fascinating call. We're at the break, so I will take the break. Lots more calls to come. Lines continue full. More with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
EWTN is everywhere. EWTN radio programming is provided free of charge to over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio stations. It's a great teaching tool for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. For a complete list of EWTN AM and FM stations across America, visit EWTNradio.net. At the bottom of the page, click Affiliates. EWTN is the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Ask Me Anything this hour and next hour with Jimmy Akin. Hey, the Jubilee year's coming up. Starts on Christmas Eve. Check it out. You can just search Jubilee 2025. It'll take you to the Vatican website where you can learn all about it. Right now, I'm looking, every single line still full. So on we go. Marching onward we go. Gil in Long Island, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Welcome back, Gil.
Welcome back. I send you guys both, as usual, an electronic sheep hug and happy sheep day to both of you because you're sheeps of the Lord.
Well, thank you.
Before I ask my question, I wanted to mention if you could pray for my friend Jerome. He's extremely intelligent. He's 84 years old, and he is an atheist. I shared with him some of my papers that I've written in college years ago. And I also shared your book with him, Words of Eternal Life. I love the book personally. He's, being that he's atheist and all of that stuff, he doesn't really believe that the Bible is the Word of God and all of that stuff. So I just asked you to pray for him. He just left yesterday, so I'm
We'll
living
pray
in a
for
nursing
him.
home.
Gil, we will do that, and I'm sure that many of our listeners are praying for your friend Jerome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay. One of my favorite verses in Genesis 2:24 says, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." Notice two. Why? One of my drivers asked me years ago, would God allow polygamy in the Old Testament, and why people didn't get punished for that kind of thing. Like, for example, David had more than one wife and all of that stuff. I know he got punished with the Bathsheba incident, but why does God not chastise people for doing that, or did he?
Well, so the first thing to say is that the ancient Israelite culture was different than ours, and it was considered an acceptable thing for a man to have more than one wife in their culture. And so they didn't read Genesis the way we read it. Now, I think that if you take off the ancient Near Eastern lenses, that there is a pro-monogamy message in early Genesis, in the creation of man. And I think that there is a pro-monogamy message later in Genesis, because every time a guy has two wives in Genesis, it ends up badly. It causes problems. And people in the ancient world recognized that there were jealousies between wives and things like that. But it was dominantly accepted, and this is the reason why God allowed it. It's because people weren't willing to give it up at the time. Jesus makes it clear in his discussion of adultery and divorce that God allowed the Israelites to divorce their wives and give them a bill of divorce, even though divorce was not God's will. He allowed them to do that because their hearts were hard. And the same thing is going to be true of having multiple wives, where this was seen as a status of rich men and success and pleasure and all kinds of things like that. And so their hearts were hard, and he worked with the people that he had. He didn't demand that they all instantly jump to a higher standard that they hadn't been raised with. And so it took some time for the full Christian understanding of monogamy to develop, and God worked with people until that happened.
Gil, it's always a pleasure when you call. Thank you very much. As you've heard, it just is so busy here this hour. So on we go with more questions. Robert's in Chicago, Illinois, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Robert. Go ahead with your question.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
My question is thank you, is in regards to the story in Acts where Ananias and Sapphira were struck down when they lied to St. Peter. And my question is, Jimmy, if you could just kind of make sense of that severe punishment for that. I mean, obviously, lying to the Holy Spirit is horrible. I understand that. But, I mean, there had been so many other cases throughout the Bible of people acting horrendously that they didn't get taken out like that. So my question is, why in that instance did that happen? And then also, I guess a follow-up question to that would be, were the two of them given a fair opportunity for repentance?
Okay, well, we've got a whole bunch of questions here. Let's take them one at a time, starting with the last. Were they given a fair opportunity to repent? Yes, because everything God does is fair. Therefore, whether it was obvious to us or not, they were given a fair opportunity to repent. What about why did they suffer in a way that other people who have done similar things have not suffered? The answer is we don't know because God doesn't tell us. And so all we can do is speculate. What would I speculate in this area? Well, I would speculate that this is something that happened on an exceptional basis because we're in an exceptional circumstance. The church is just getting started out at this point, and therefore, in order to set the church on a productive, beneficial course for the future, God wanted to make certain principles clear from the beginning for the benefit of future Christians. And so he allowed a more dramatic example to arise here than would happen in future instances. And so I would say, although I can't be sure because the Bible doesn't tell us, this is just Jimmy Akin's speculation, but Jimmy Akin's speculation would be that God allowed this more dramatic instance to occur in order to set a good precedent for the future, even if he didn't intend for this kind of dramatic thing to happen in every circumstance. And then, of course, there's the perennial question, why would this is a bad thing? Why would God allow this to happen at all? For the same reason God allows every other bad thing to happen, so that he can bring an equal or greater good out of it.
All right.
All right, perfect. Thank you. God bless and Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you. Thanks very much. All right, off we go down to Louisiana. David is in Lafayette, Louisiana, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. David, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, hi, everybody. It's an honor to talk to y'all. Jimmy, I've been always wanted to ask you this question. It's been bugging me for a long time. Okay, so I had a friend. Well, still have a friend, but he was a Protestant and converted to Catholicism as well as his whole family did, and his extended family. But anyway, he's very, very good. He's got a very good, strong biblical knowledge, and we would often talk about things in the Bible. And one day he was telling me that the hardest thing he had to overcome on his journey to Catholicism was the body of Christ, the Eucharist. And, that's a big problem for a lot of Protestants. And he was telling me that one day he was reading John chapter 6, just trying to, doing his research. And he noticed that there was a whole bunch of people that didn't take him literally, and they just walked away, and he's always been fascinated with numbers in the Bible. And he said, the verse where the non-believers that don't want to follow him anymore in John is John chapter 6, verse 66, which is, he said, I've always been fascinated with the Antichrist and Revelation. And man, he said, that just stood out for me. He goes, and I know that, John, when he wrote the gospel, he didn't list chapters and verses at that time, but many centuries later, somebody certainly did, and he just thought it was so odd that particular chapter and verse, which is 666, and it's evil references to the mark of the beast.
Yeah, David, I'm not sure what your question is for me.
Well, I just wonder which. Has the church ever, or has any theologist ever, mentioned that, or has it ever been discussed that was something weird in numerology.
Okay, so I've never run across any theologian or biblical commentator noting this. I've noted it myself, and I'm sure others have. I just haven't seen anyone write about it. The Bible chapters and the Bible verses are not in the original. So John did not write his gospel with chapters and verses. It took centuries for those to develop, and the chapters were developed first. The system of chapters that we use now was invented in the 1200s or so, and the system of verses that we use now was in the 1500s. And so there are different systems. None of them are divinely inspired, and therefore we shouldn't attribute too much significance to this. It is ironic that John chapter 6 verse 66 is a sad verse, where it says that many people who were his disciples stopped following him after he refused to qualify or modify his teaching on his body and blood. And yeah, there is an association with not the Antichrist, but with the beast of the sea in the book of Revelation, which we're told has the number 666. So there is a kind of oddity there. And if you want to say, well, that's just an interesting thing that happened under divine providence, well, I'd say, yeah, it is an interesting thing that happened under divine providence, but I wouldn't make too much out of it, because although John 66 is inspired, the designation John 66 is not inspired.
I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to send you one of Jimmy's books. You were so gracious at the beginning of the call to say you were a fan of Jimmy. How about I'll just leave you in the hands of Nathaniel, who's on the phones. You just tell him. Maybe the Bible is a Catholic book, but if there's a different one that you've wanted, just tell Nathaniel. And
that's a Trent book, not mine.
The Bible is a Catholic book?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard you. Never mind.
Okay. That scared me for a second.
Thought you said something else.
All right.
I have a lot of distractions this hour.
People should know this. Jimmy is dealing with a lot of our technical issues here in the studio as we go. I don't think you probably wouldn't have even noticed, but it's a lot of technical stuff going on. Sasha, I don't know, I have a place for Sasha, but Sasha, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Oh, yes. So the Witch of Endor, the famous story about bringing up prophet, was the witch evil for doing witchcraft to bring up the prophet?
Well, she's presented as if she's an Israelite, and the Israelites were forbidden to. She's also not a witch. That's a modern term that didn't really apply. She was an inquirer of the dead. What we might call a medium, but the King James Version says witch, but that's not really a good translation. In any event, the Israelites were forbidden to inquire of the dead, and so she wasn't supposed to be doing that as an Israelite. And so what she was doing was wrong, but that didn't stop her from doing it. The text presents it as, Samuel appeared, and it says it uses the factive verb know. If I say, I know that Cy had pizza for lunch yesterday, that means not only do I believe that Cy had pizza for lunch, it means it's true that Cy had pizza for lunch. That's what's known in linguistics as a factive verb that indicates that it is a fact that is being asserted here. And the author of 1 Samuel says, then Saul knew that it was Samuel, implying it really was Samuel. And the author then goes on to describe Samuel as talking. So it really is Samuel. He really is coming up. And so what we can infer from that is that even though the Israelites were forbidden to do this, God nevertheless could let it happen, and did let it happen in this case.
All right, Sasha, I'll come back to you. Does that make sense to you? No, Sasha?
Okay. That's a New Age interpretation.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
I don't.
That's a New Age interpretation.
No, it's not a new. It is not a New Age interpretation. It is a biblical interpretation that has been broadly understood throughout Christian history. The New Age movement, which is a religious movement inspired by theosophy and American culture, is an entirely different phenomenon that has nothing to do with the interpretation of this biblical text. In fact, in the book of Sirach, it confirms that it was Samuel, saying that Samuel prophesied to the king even after his death.
Sasha, thank you for the call. You can probably hear the music. That means we got to take a break, and lots more to come. If you're on the line, hang on the line. If you haven't called yet, there's 3 lines open right now. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything, and the number is 888-318-7884. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. A little bit more of an exciting Friday afternoon than we'd like. Some interesting video and audio things going on here in the studio, but we've been working through it. And Jimmy's mostly had to try to ignore it while he answers questions. So it's like a degree of difficulty show today. Let's see how difficult can we make it on Jimmy. But we've got lots more questions. Maybe we've got it straightened out and it'll work this hour. 888-318-7884 is the number. I'm only saying that for one person because there's one line open. So I don't know who you are, but go ahead and call it 888-318-7884. Jimmy, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Got a new podcast, the Jimmy Akin podcast, just started this year, earlier in the fall. And will continue into perpetuity, I assume. It doesn't have an expiration date, does it?
Nope. That's the plan, to keep going as long as I'm able to keep making it.
As long as Jimmy keeps going, the Jimmy Akin podcast should keep going. So check it out. You can check it out on YouTube as well. Jimmy's got lots and lots of stuff at YouTube. Let me see. Let's just head back to the phones and see how that goes. Let's give that a shot and see how that goes. Carlos in Dallas, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. We're glad you're here, Carlos. Go ahead with your question.
Hey, guys. Hey, Cy. This is your pal, and I'm still impressed by how you say the phone number. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know if Jimmy knows this, that Carlos encourages me to slow down in saying the phone number. He's been calling
in
it.
that case, I heartily approve.
Yeah, you and Jimmy. I feel I'm doing better, Carlos, and I appreciate the positive reinforcement because I do feel like I have attended to your instructions and done better.
I'll tell you, you have, and I'm very proud of you, and I love your show, and I've got my grandson here with me. He's 17 years old. He's a future computer person, and I was just telling him, hey, Martin, Jimmy Akins is on. I got to call in, but I doubt I'll get through because he's so famous. So I'm very grateful I got through.
Well, we're glad you're here.
My question, thank you. So I have two questions in the same theme. So, Jimmy, I was wondering if you can help me. What is the position, the latest position of the Catholic Church, the Vatican Magisterium, Pope, regarding extraterrestrial life? And then I also have been reading that they're associating extraterrestrial life with the demonic. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on those two questions.
Okay, well, the church doesn't have any teaching on extraterrestrial life, be it intelligent or unintelligent. This is not a matter of doctrine. This is a matter of science. Either extraterrestrial life, intelligent or non-intelligent, exists or it doesn't. And that's a matter of science. That's not a matter of faith. So that's not really a faith question. Having said that, the church, if it turns out there is intelligent or non-intelligent extraterrestrial life, the church has no problem with that. If it turns out there's no life, intelligent or non-intelligent, in the universe besides us, the church has no problem with that either. This is really not a matter of theology. You then have some people who are trying to explain reported alien encounters in terms of demonic phenomena. And that also is not a matter of church teaching. The church does not teach that reported alien encounters or UFOs or whatever are demonic. So this is a matter of theological speculation. If in a particular case, if you have evidence that a particular encounter, whether it's with a UFO or an alien or someone who appears to be your brother Bob, is really a demon appearing in disguise, well, then you've got evidence for that being a demonic encounter. But we shouldn't be paranoid about such things. One of the things about reported UFO encounters is that they don't fit the historic pattern of demonic behavior, just like your brother Bob. I'm assuming, I'm speaking hypothetically here, but if you had a brother Bob, demons don't behave the way your brother Bob normally does either. And so it is paranoid to look at something that behaves differently than demons historically have and assume that it must be a demon, whether it's your brother Bob or whether it's a UFO or whatever it may be. That's just paranoid. to assume that something must be demons, even though it doesn't appear to act like demons are known to act. And so I would say, can I eliminate the possibility that demons never impersonate aliens? No, I can't. But can I affirm confidently that they are doing that? No, I can't affirm that either. And I certainly don't have evidence to say, oh, they're all demons. To my mind, that is a paranoid approach that doesn't understand Catholic teaching in this area, and that is going to make Christians look foolish and paranoid, because it is foolish and paranoid to just assume it.
What do you think, Carlos?
Wonderful answer. And if I may just ask this real quick, Jimmy, what is what you just said? Your narrative just now, is that your opinion, on your personal opinion on the theme that we're discussing?
Yes, that's my personal opinion. It is not a matter of church teaching. As I said, the church has no teaching either on extraterrestrial life or on reported UFO alien encounters. It has no teaching on either of those subjects. This is not a matter of doctrine.
Carlos, thank you for the call. Thank you for calling 888-318-7884. I'm just showing off, Carlos. Let's go to Virginia. Michael in Virginia, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
In relation to my question, I'll keep it all brief, but in my past, I grew up Protestant Christian, went away from the faith for about 10 years. During that time, followed a few dark paths, and I ended up actually becoming a practicing, like a theological Luciferian. And now I'm back in the faith, and I'm in the OCIA program, joining the opposite, getting out of the enemy's camp. So with that all in mind, I've noticed my relationships from those 10 years when I wandered away. I've had a lot of beliefs, worldly beliefs about, a lot of things, that are going on in today's world that have done a complete 180. And because of that, I find myself in a position where I have a difficult time. I'm basically avoiding a lot of the people that, I used to know and, used to have, deep conversations with, purely just because of the, the guilt and the shame of where I was versus where I am now. And I guess, the question is, how do I keep the past from when I was away from Christ from interfering with, trying to pursue a relationship with these people now that I'm back with Christ?
Okay, so I need to ask at least one clarifying question. These people that you are having, I guess I need to ask at least two. These first one would be these people that you're having difficulty relating to now. You say that you're having difficulty because of shame. Is that correct? That
right,
you were
because, I used to have
Luciferian, but
these
you're not now.
Conversations. Yeah, where I stand now is much different from where I stood in the past with them.
Okay. And second clarifying question, are these people also Luciferians or are they not?
I only have one friend from that community, and he's a very good best friend. But yeah, I find myself not talking to him because he is a Satanist.
Okay. And how would you characterize the other people that you have difficulty connecting with who are not Satanists? I mean, are they like Catholics or non-believers or?
Yeah, primarily non-believers.
Okay. Well, so I would say it's understandable that, you look at your time as a Luciferian or a Satanist and you say, wow, that was a mistake. And it's understandable to feel some embarrassment about that. We all have mistakes in our past that we're embarrassed by. I would say there's no need to disconnect from these folks, with the possible exception of your Satanist friend, and I'll come back to him in a minute. But with all the other people, I don't see any reason to say, well, you need to disconnect from them. I would say that how I would present something like this would be to say, okay, yeah, I made a mistake, and by God's grace, he's enabled me to see that. And so I'm thankful to God that he allowed me to make a course correction in life. And I'm grateful that God forgives people who make mistakes and who decide they want to pursue the path of love. And I would present this as a positive thing to them. I would be honest about, yeah, I made a mistake, but thank God he's helped me arrive at a new path, and I'm much happier for it. So that's how I would present it to them. In terms of your friend who's still a Satanist, I would say that you may or may not need to make a break with him. If he causes you lots of problems, including being tempted to the dark side, but not limited to that. If he's just a painful person to be around, then you might need to discontinue that relationship. But otherwise, you could use it as a positive. If you're able to present it to him the same way you were able to present it to others and say, well, this was a time in my life and I was mistaken, but God has allowed me to make a course correction, and I'm so happy that he did. And God can do that for you too. Then it becomes an occasion of evangelization, and you may do him spiritual good. So I would say all of those things in terms of managing the outward facing sign of your relationship. If what you're concerned about, on the other hand, is the inward aspect of just the emotions that you feel, because we all experience, shame and so forth, unless someone's a sociopath, they will experience some degree of shame when they've made a mistake and they realize it. I would say, just do your best to do what seems appropriate in the moment and try to be a positive influence. Try not to burden others. I mean, you may need to find someone you can talk to, maybe a clergyman, maybe a counselor, maybe a particular friend that you can talk to about your feelings more. But in general, I would tend not to overly burden people with my own feelings of shame or so forth. I would try to manage my feelings in a way that allows me to be as much of a positive influence for others as I can. Are those general principles of use to you?
Yeah, I think so. It's obviously much easier to say than to put into practice, but the past isn't something that can be changed, and I'm just hoping that, from my own, history, that could be maybe used as a level of understanding when it comes to trying to have a conversation like this with my friend, the Satanist friend. But and also, as they say, time heals wounds, and so these things will not be as sensitive as in the future as they are now. And so I would tend to look on this as much as possible as an opportunity. I would maintain humility about my past and about my present, and just say I thank God that he's enabled me to have a turnaround on this issue, and he loves everyone and wants them to have a turnaround from whatever they need to turn around from and pursue the path of love.
Michael, thanks. So thanks for that conversation and that call, and God bless you in your on your journey there. And I'd love to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. I think you will enjoy it. And if you'd like it, just hang on the line. Nathaniel will get your information and we'll send it out to you. I got to take a quick break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Another great podcast on EWTN Podcast Central is Restless. It's four zany Catholic young adults seeking God in the midst of this crazy mixed-up world. They discuss life, relationships, work, fun, and everything else in our world through the lens of our Catholic faith. You can hear this and other faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates around the world at EWTN Podcast Central. Visit EWTN.com/radio and click on Podcast Central today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being here with us. I shouldn't be surprised, but it is impressive how full the phones have stayed today. Lots of questions for Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's an Ask Me Anything, and we've had a pretty good variety and lots of variety ahead as well. So off we go back to the phones. Elizabeth is in Indianapolis, Indiana, listening on YouTube. Elizabeth, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, thank you, Cy. Hello, Jimmy. My question is, I'm disabled and live alone, and I don't have transportation, so I haven't been to Mass in a very long time. So I'm clearly not in a state of grace. Are my prayers, like when I pray the chaplet for souls and when I pray the rosary for people, are my prayers valid if I'm not in a state of grace? I know that seems silly, but I'm not going to stop praying, but I'm wondering, are they valid?
Okay. Well, as we covered last episode, valid and invalid are not really categories that apply to prayers. God hears everybody because God is omniscient. So he knows everyone's requests. And Cy Kellett, you may recall an incident where Jesus went to the Sea of Galilee and crossed it into the territory of the Gadarenes.
Yes, I do.
And he encountered a couple of guys who were possessed by demons, and the demons made a request of Jesus. Do you remember what their request was?
Please just don't send us where we don't want to go. Can we go into those pigs over there?
Yeah.
Paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing, but what did Jesus say? You can paraphrase that too.
Yeah, go into the pigs.
Yeah. So all a prayer request is a request. And so here we find Jesus answering the prayers of demons, and they are most definitely not in a state of grace. So there is value in terms of God does reward. He wants people to do good. And so he wants people to be in a state of grace. And so he may answer your prayers even more if you're in a state of grace, but it is not a requirement that you be in a state of grace in order to be able to pray to God and get a valid get a response that's positive. In fact, a lot of people, when they're not in a state of grace, one of the best things they can do is pray that God will help them enter a state of grace. And so being in a state of grace is just not a requirement for God either knowing about your prayer request or God granting your prayer request. He can and does do both. Now, he may answer your prayers positively even more if you're in a state of grace, but it's not like he stops his ears and goes, la, 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 I'm not listening to you and I'm not going to grant your request. He just does not do that. Then there is a more fundamental matter, though, Elizabeth, that I want to attend to, which is you said that you're disabled and you don't have transport, and so you haven't been to Mass in a considerable amount of time, and you said, therefore, you're not in a state of grace. But that doesn't follow. Merely not being able to get to Mass doesn't put you doesn't put you out of a state of grace. The Church understands that there are situations where people are not able to go to Mass, and if you're genuinely not able, then God understands that, and you're not required to go, and it's not a sin to miss Mass in those situations. So it wouldn't take you out of a state of grace just because you've missed Mass, even for a lengthy period of time. Now, I would say it would be a good thing to explore, and I don't know what your mobility situation is, but I would say it would be a good thing to call your parish and see if there might be a volunteer who could help you get to Mass on a more regular basis. But merely the fact that you haven't been able to go because of your disability and lack of transportation, that doesn't mean you're not in a state of grace. So, so I wouldn't be too hard on myself in that regard. You may well be in a state of grace. Even if you're not, though, you can always arrange for a priest to come to you and hear your confession, and that'll put you back in a state of grace. If you're not in one, well, a priest can come to your home and hear your confession and return you to a state of grace there. They could either say Mass at your home or bring you Holy Communion. In fact, they regularly have people who do. Some of them are priests or deacons, but others are what are known as extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, who take Holy Communion to people who are not able to attend Mass, either because of illness or they're in the hospital or they're disabled or things like that. So I would say, it would be a good thing if you're not able to make it to Mass to, watch Mass online or on TV. But it would be even better if you can make contact with your parish and find out, is there someone who could bring you to Mass if you have the mobility and it's mainly a transportation issue. And even then, you can live a valid sacramental life, even if you're not able to leave your home, by having a priest to come to your home and hear your confession, or having a minister of communion bring you communion. And so there are a bunch of options here, and I want to be encouraging to you.
Well, thank you. I did have a priest come and hear my confession a couple of months ago. It was very comforting to have that done.
Awesome, indeed, as it should be.
Elizabeth, is there a book that we can send you? One of our books? Maybe I can. I can send you one of Jimmy's books if you'd like.
Well, I would gladly accept any one of Jimmy's books.
Okay, Nathaniel, are you willing to have another conversation and find a book that, you can go through Jimmy's titles with Elizabeth, and we'll see about which book she'd like. Thank you, Elizabeth, and I hope we'll speak again. Off to San Antonio, Texas we go. Emily is listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Emily, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Hopefully this makes sense.
Emily, you're breaking up just a little bit. You broke up just a little bit. You said hopefully it'll make sense, and I'm sure that it will, but make sense directly into the phone. We'll see if we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Part of the extended family that I'm a part of is amazing. National, but their faith is very strong, and we've never really had any, big to-dos, I guess you could say, between the different parts of the family. They have some young children, and there was recently, they announced kind of like in a milestone way, I guess you could say, that one of their younger kids prayed for salvation, and the non-denominational side of the family, they're very, very, very excited, and it does sound exciting. I'm very confused. I know that they did like a mission ceremony as well at their church, but I try and do my research and understand either biblically or kind of like tradition-wise, like where some of that stuff's coming from. But when they said that one, I was like, I don't know why. That's just kind of like sticking with me on my mind, because I'm like,
Emily,
what
I'm not
about
sure.
baptism?
Emily, I'm not sure what you're asking me. Could you put this in the form of a question?
Yeah, I guess I want to be charitable if the subject comes up in the future of why not just baptize them? Why is like a child praying for salvation like a thing, like that they expect them to do? If that makes sense, it's like, why not just baptize them? I
So
don't know if that
there
makes
are
sense.
certain branches of Christianity where they have a teaching that is known as credo baptism. The alternative position is known as pedo baptism. Credo means I believe. Pedo means a child. And so pedo baptism is the view that small children should be baptized, even though they're not yet of the age to have personal belief. And the Catholic Church is a pedo Baptist church. So we, like, for example, Anglicans and Lutherans and Methodists and Presbyterians, all of us baptize children before they reach the age where they really understand their Christian faith. And the understanding is that they're going to be raised in the faith. And so that's one of the promises that the parents make at the time of baptism, is that I will raise this child in the Christian faith. But there's a whole other school of thought known as credo baptism that I'll talk about on the other side of the break.
I hope you can hang on, Emily. We have to do this break. This is one we don't have a choice about. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. What can you say to family members who are not baptizing children? We'll continue with that question right after this on Catholic Answers Live. What was the church like in its infancy? In a word, Catholic. And Joe Heschmeyer has the receipts. In his best-selling book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, he gives you the details from the historical records of the first 2 centuries of Christianity. Right now, get a copy for just $10, plus free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Get more information and order The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at theearlychurchwascatholic.com.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth today at 4 p.m. Eastern.
On the next Beacon of Truth, we're starting our celebration for Christmas as we also look at Soulful Psalm 48.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. There's a little groovy music for you on this Friday. Getting closer and closer to Christmas. Next Wednesday, Jimmy Akin's our guest. It's Ask Me Anything, and Emily's on the line in San Antonio, Texas. Some family, not Catholic, have not baptized children, and she'd like a charitable way to approach this with the family. Jimmy, you were getting started on an answer.
Yeah, well, it seemed like what she was after was understanding their position. And she said, why is a child praying for salvation a thing? Why don't they just baptize them? And the answer is because the Paedo-Baptist tradition is not the only one in the Christian church. One of the things that happened at the time of the Reformation was there were a group of people who started, so this goes back about 500 years, who adopted a position known as credo baptism, which is the idea that a person needs to have conscious faith in Jesus Christ in order to be baptized. And so that would mean you can't baptize small children because they don't yet have conscious faith. And so it would be natural in a tradition where that's believed to be the case for it to be a special occasion for a child to decide to embrace the faith and pray for salvation and then go on to get baptized and so forth. So that's why it's a big deal in their circles. And it's certainly a good thing that their children have decided that they want to embrace the Christian faith, that they want to accept God's gift of salvation. All those are good things. It would be, I would say, better if they had, from the time they were very small, been baptized and thus always been in a state of grace. But better late than never. So if someone says their child has just accepted the Christian faith, I would say, great, that's awesome. I might, depending on the context of the discussion, go on to say, you might want to think about this baptism issue and who it's appropriate to baptize, because there's another side to all of this that you may not be aware of. There are better arguments for baptizing young children than you might realize, in which case if that position is true, then you could have God's grace working in their soul even sooner in life than when they are old enough to understand things and make a conscious decision themselves. So I could then offer to hook them up with information on that subject. And we've got a lot of information on this subject on Catholic.com. If you just go to Catholic.com and search on infant baptism, a whole bunch of resources will come up, including ones from the early church that talked about, the early church's willingness to baptize small children, including even biblical discussions of the baptism of small children. Also, I've got videos at youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, and my last name is very easy to spell. It is just 4 letters, A-K-I-N-N, as in Nancy. There is no S, E, or T in it. It's just Akin, not Akins, but Akin, just like it sounds. And I've got a video on why Christians from very, very early days were believers in infant baptism. And so, if you want to go further on the subject of infant baptism with them, we've got lots of resources for you. I would just say you want to be sensitive and you don't want to put a damper on their party, because it is a good thing that their child has decided to embrace the Christian faith. That is something to celebrate. And you don't want to kind of be a scold and nag. It's like, oh, well, okay, good, your child has accepted Christ, but what you should have done was this. There's a time and a place for broaching topics of this nature. And in the midst of a celebration, yay, my kid just accepted Jesus, that's not really the time to be bringing up some of these things. That's the time for celebration.
Emily, thank you. I'm going to keep going. I hope that was helpful to you. I'm going to keep going just because it's getting near the end, and there are still people on every single one of our phone lines. Off to Cincinnati we go. Hannah is listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Hannah, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Hannah. How old are you?
7.
You're 7. Well, thank you very much for your call. Do you have a question for Mr. Akin?
Yes.
All right, go ahead with your question.
In Joseph's dream, how does he know it's a real angel and not a normal dream?
Okay, in whose dream?
Joseph.
Okay, are we talking, I thought you said Genesis, but are we talking about Joseph, the father of Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's actually in Matthew. And the answer is, we're not told how he knew that it was an angel and not just his own imagination. But we can think of some possibilities. One possibility is he didn't normally dream about angels, and so when he had the angel appear to him and explain this to him, he just accepted it, and it didn't occur to him that he might dream about an angel because of his subconscious. because they didn't really know about the subconscious, or they didn't have a clear idea of the subconscious back then. So he may have just assumed, hey, I saw an angel in a dream. That must have been a message from God. Then, even if he had any doubts about that, when it turned out that the angel, when he had other dreams about angels that did come true, like when he said King Herod is searching for the boy and you need to take him to Egypt. And it turned out that was true. Herod was searching for the boy and he did need to take him to Egypt. That would also serve to confirm that this was a real angel and not just his imagination, like in a normal dream. Also, there's another possibility, which it isn't mentioned in Matthew, but a lot of times people who have, I'm trying to use vocabulary. I'm trying to use words that you'll understand at your age, but there are people who have special dreams. And one of the ways they know that this is a special dream and not a regular dream is it seems more real to them than other dreams. And sometimes people who have these special dreams will say things like, after they wake up, they'll say, this dream was realer than real. It felt really real and it seemed really real. I'm trying to keep my words simple, but that's the basic idea. And so it could be that St. Joseph had one of these dreams that was just realer than real to him. And so he knew, based on that fact, that it wasn't an ordinary dream, that it was a special dream. And so those are some of the possibilities.
You know what? Thank you very much for calling us and for waiting so patiently on the phone, Hannah. If there is an adult there with you, if you could give them the phone and they give us an address, we have a book we'd like to send you to say thank you for the call. It's called The Truth Is Out There. It's a graphic novel from Catholic Answers Press. And if you're not ready for it yet, you'll be ready for it soon. So if there's a grown-up, hand them the phone, and Nathaniel will get an address to send you that book. I can do another question before I have to take a break. We'll go to Michael in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Michael, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen.
Sure.
I'm involved in the ecumenical movement pretty long time. I'm 61, and since I was 18, really, and I've been really intrigued with Romans 11 and just the draw of the Jewish people towards the revelation of Jesus, and also the Native Americans. And there's a scripture that this movement I've been trying to understand that's called Towards Jerusalem Council 2, praying for like us Gentiles, reinviting the Jews back into full communion, but they see it as a kind of a parallel with Our Lady of Guadalupe being Native American, drawing us to like finalize the Great Commission, and that the two, like the last shall be first and the first shall be last, is in those eschatological movements of the Holy Spirit. And I just wanted your comment on that, Jimmy, about just Romans 11.
Well, Romans 11 is a whole chapter, and I can't really give you a commentary on an entire chapter of the Bible. Is there a particular verse in this you're wondering about?
Well, like St. Paul says, that if the Jews' disobedience was our opportunity to, as Gentiles, to believe and receive, what will happen when they do believe, but life for the whole world. And so St. Paul seems to be saying to us that you who are of Gentile background, live your life in such a way that you make the Jews envious for the gospel. And then Paul later describes how God has bound disobedience in the heart of the Jew and the Gentile, that he might demonstrate his glory through his mercy. And it just seems that listening to St. John Paul II's teaching and Pope Benedict and Pope Francis towards the movements of the Holy Spirit, bringing in, the all the nations, especially
Yeah,
the first
Michael,
nation.
we're coming up on a break, and I want to have the opportunity to
Okay.
answer you. Can you put this in the form of a question?
Do you see more prayer towards this consummation, if you will, of the Jewish people and those indigenous host nation people coming to a greater attachment to the church that brings a greater clarity to what St. Paul's teaching in Romans 11?
No, I don't think so. I think that St. Paul's meaning is as clear as it's ever been. And so I don't really look to current events in terms of shedding light on things in the Bible. I think we have to take the Bible on its own terms and figure out what it means in its own cultural context. And then once we've done that, we may be able to find applications in our own day. But what you don't want to do is start by noticing things in your own day and then trying to read those as, oh, this must be mentioned in the Bible. Well, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. The starting point for biblical interpretation is the Bible itself, not what's going on today in some context. In fact, this is a big mistake that's made in certain segments of the evangelical community and frankly in some segments of the Catholic community, where people start with just kind of a vague idea of, oh, the Bible mentions something kind of sounds like this, something that's going on today, and reading the two in light of each other. That leads people to perennially conclude, oh, we must be in the last day right now. And people have been concluding that for the last 2,000 years because they're making the mistake of interpreting the Bible in light of current events rather than figuring out what the Bible means on its own and then seeing whether or not it corresponds to current events. Having said that, there will be a final conversion of the Jewish people, at least in bulk. Not necessarily every individual Jew, but there will be a large-scale conversion of the Jewish people that will be one of the final events in world history. And we can certainly do things to, encourage Jewish evangelization, encourage the embrace of the gospel in Jewish circles, as we should in all circles. But whether or not we are on the verge of the final conversion, that's something we have to leave in God's hands. We can do our best to evangelize people, including Jewish people today, but whether or not we're approaching rapidly the final conversion of the Jewish people, that's something we've got to leave up to God.
And that will take us straight to the break. Thank you very much for the call, Michael. We got to take this break. Be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1996. EWTN launches EWTN.com, one of the first Catholic websites in the world. In the late 1990s, it becomes one of the first entities in the world to do video streaming over the internet.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Almost time to get started with my Christmas shopping. Almost time. On the 20th, that's about the right time to start. Jimmy Akin is our guest. I'll tell you what, if I had asked for callers for Christmas, this show would be an avalanche of Christmas presents. Every single light on the phone still lit up with a caller. So back we go. I believe I was going to Michael in Clifford, Maryland. Michael, thank you very much for waiting. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. I have a question. First of all, Jimmy, I've enjoyed watching your journey to faith, and it's been it's been entertaining and enlightening.
Thank you.
In the Mass, at the consecration, the one thing which this is our Jewish roots, but everyone at the Last Supper, at the Seder, when Christ said, when they in the evangelist says, he after the supper was over, he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. I would think that each one at that table would know that blessing by heart. But I've asked priests, I said, what is the blessing? Now, I've actually looked up the Seder, and I've seen it in Hebrew, and it's very short, and it's very beautiful. It's about, the bread is from the Lord. It actually sounds more like the it's very similar to the when we say "Blessed be God forever," when He takes the bread and the wine. But I was wondering, it seems incomplete. My point.
I'm sorry, you cut out there, Michael. What was your question?
The last part, Michael?
Oh, you didn't get
just the last part.
No,
you cut out.
You're cutting out.
Yeah, one thing, the blessing. When he takes the bread and he blesses it, and the question is, what does he say when he blesses it?
Well, the Gospels don't tell us, and so we can only speculate on the matter. Now, some people may want to base their speculation on later records of Jewish rituals, like the Passover Seders that were recorded in later Jewish tradition. And that is a valid set of evidence to include as part of the speculation, but it never rises above speculation because we don't know definitively exactly how Jewish Passover Seders were worded in Jesus's time. That's the first reason. Second reason is we don't know, was everyone using the same prayers as all other Jews? There was considerable diversity in the Jewish community in the first century, so there may have been different communities using different prayers for Passover. And then thirdly, Jesus is clearly doing his own thing here, because the typical Passover Seder does not include the Lord's Supper. And so it could be that the blessing that Jesus said was not a blessing that was over the Eucharist, in connection with the Eucharist in particular, was not a blessing that was part of the Seder. It may have been a blessing that was newly introduced as part of the newly introduced Lord's Supper that Jesus was instituted. So we can speculate, and later Jewish Passover Seders may have a little bit of light they can shed, but they're not going to give us confidence here. And since the Gospels don't record the answer, we really can't go beyond speculation in this area.
Well, I'll have to ask him if I get to see him.
Yeah. The Lord, I assume you mean, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
No, you can certainly ask him. He would know the answer.
Thanks, Michael. I'm moving quick to try to get everybody on. Nathan's up in Salt Lake City, Utah, watching on YouTube. Nathan, thank you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Howdy, Mr. Aiken.
Howdy.
So I've written it. I'm just going to read it off to you, the questions at the end.
Okay.
I've got a friend. We're both former Mormons. You would have figured by me calling from Salt Lake City, right? So I've recently entered the catechumenate. He's been a kind of Protestant Calvinist for a few years. I say a kind of Calvinist because he believes in the apokatastasis and an ultimate universal salvation. But that's just background.
Nathan, just so you know, we're getting real close to the end of the program. We've got a bunch of people who are waiting on the line. Can you just let me know the question?
Yeah, it's dealing with St. Augustine's retractions, St. Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. We were having a discussion about retractiones. We were having a discussion about St. Augustine's interpretation of that verse. His interpretation was that St. Augustine was asserting that the verse he was referencing made the papacy a suggestion, something that one can choose to accept or not. Mine was that it was in context of a argument he was making against the Donatists, and he left the door open for both interpretations. And the Catholic position is that the interpretation that St. Augustine was advancing does not attack the papacy. And so my question is, how far off the mark are we on trying to interpret St. Augustine's writing?
Well, I don't know, because this is not a subject that's easily dealt with in a live call-in radio show, because St. Augustine's opinion is that Scripture has polyvalent meanings, meaning you can Augustine interpreted in the same text in multiple senses, and he doesn't always view them as the different interpretations as being in conflict with each other. St. Paul does something similar with the body of Christ, where in some passages he interprets Christ's body as if he's the head of this body that then is below Christ's mystical neck. But then in other passages, the same St. Paul envisions the Christ's body as a separate entity, as the wife of Christ who's one flesh with him. And so you've got different conceptualizations of even what the body of Christ is in St. Paul. And in the same way, you have different conceptualizations of what the rock is in Matthew 15 and Matthew 16 on the part of St. Paul. And for that matter, the Catholic Church today, the Catechism interprets it in more than one way. So I can't really, in a radio answer, look at just one text in St. Augustine, and especially without having the words in front of me, like his retractations, and comment on how verbally summarized expressions of attempts to express his view, how well they do or don't correspond. That's something I'd frankly need more time to do. I'd need the words in front of me, both of the purported summaries and of St. Augustine. If we're asking what's correct here, though, I would say that regardless of what St. Augustine's view was, there are structural features in Matthew 16 that mandate that Peter be the rock, that he is the primary significator of the rock. And so it refers primarily to him. And those structural features, which I've written about on other occasions, are so obvious. They're even there in English. You don't have to resort to the Greek to see them. And so I would say any view that says that Peter is not the primary referent of the rock. I'm not saying there aren't other referents, but if any view that says Peter is not the primary referent of the rock is simply exegetically mistaken. And I would say that to St. Augustine if he was still alive and asking me about the subject. If he at any point in his career said or implied that Peter was not the primary referent, I'd say, I'm sorry, but that is in disagreement with the way the text is structured.
Nathan, thanks. That would probably mean another retractation from Augustine once he. Yeah. he would just that's one of the great things about it, though, is like, here's some things I said before. I no longer believe them. Here's that's basically what the retractations are, right? I think. Well,
or at least things he'd modify.
Yeah. It's a great humility. Thanks everybody who called. We're not going to get to any more calls today, but thank you very much for those.
We tried.
We did the very best we could. You just wouldn't stop calling. But we'll do it again on Monday, so you can join us again then, and we'll try it again, or you can try calling again. Don't forget, there's a big sale still going on. It's a crazy good sale over at shop.catholic.com. You can get full Catholic Answers School of Apologetics courses for just $25, and you can get mini courses for just $10. And Carrie says that the last time we did this sale, it was the biggest, craziest sale of the year. So that's because it's an amazing deal. So head on over to shop.catholic.com. Lots of stuff's on sale at shop.catholic.com, or you can just go to schoolofapologetics.com. Jimmy's got a bunch of courses there. Take some of Jimmy's courses for $25 or even $10 for mini courses. You really can't beat that. Jimmy, thank you very much. I'm sorry we presented you with a virtual obstacle course of technical difficulties, but I appreciate you.
We got it sorted out by the end.
Yeah, we did. And you persevered through it. Thanks. All right.
And Merry Christmas to everybody, too.
Oh, that's right. We won't have you between now and Christmas. So thanks. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, everybody who's listening. Get out there. Get that shopping done. We'll see you Monday, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.